Welcome to this interview with author Paddy Murray, the final event of the 2021 Harold's Cross Community Festival. My name is Alison O'Connor. Now, Paddy Murray has had a far more exciting journalistic career than I have had. He never planned to be a journalist, although as a young boy, he did produce a publication titled The Daily Midget, which was a hand-drawn newspaper which he sold to his father. A few years later, in 1973, he got a job with independent newspapers. And it was a job, as he said himself, that lasted 46 years. During that time, Paddy met an array, and I mean an array of celebrities, everyone from Elton John to John Wayne and Eric Cantona. He wrote about Irish scandals, tragedies, crimes, and much more. He's also a comedy writer, and you'll have spotted Paddy's name over the years on The Late Late Show, The Brendan O'Connor Show credits, and he's also written for the BBC. To cap it all, Paddy has just written a book entitled And Finally, A Journalist's Life in 250 Stories. It's published by Liffey Press. Welcome, Paddy.
Thank you. Thank you, God.
Paddy, you are a long-time resident of Harold's Cross, and I'm wondering if you'd tell us a little bit about what you like about living in Harold's Cross.
There are lots of things I like about it. I mean, having two parks is lovely. We had until recently a dog, but unfortunately she died prematurely at 6 years of age. But it was great for the dog to up to Mount Argus or to the Harold's Cross Park. It's just it's a lovely, safe place to walk around. There's shops you pop in and out of. Great to see new shops now, like the bakery and providers. And when I worked in town in the Tribune, I walked to work and back. I mean, it is really, really. This is one of the things, by the way, with Bus Connects. Harold's Cross isn't an obstacle on the way to the city. It is the city. And so is Terranure, and so is Rathgar. We're just as much part of the city as Grafton Street. And that's one of the things I love about Harold's Cross, is that we are a city suburb, a village, a city village.
Yeah. And it definitely, I agree with you, it definitely has that village feeling. Paddy, I'm going to start off. There's so much in the book, and I really did enjoy reading it. It gallops along. I suppose one of it's early in the book, but certainly one of the ones that stood out, one of the encounters, was your meeting with John Wayne. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I was only a kid in the office, and I think I was sent out to do the job because nobody believed John Wayne was actually in the Gresham. It was kind of someone said he's in the Gresham, Paddy couldn't see if he is. And I went up with the photographer, Ray McGilligan, and we went in and I said to the porter, "Is John Wayne here?" I felt like an awful idiot. "Is John Wayne here?" "Yeah, he's in the dining room." So I went into the dining room. There's John Wayne sitting having a big breakfast. I went over and said, "My name's Paddy Murray from the Evening Herald. Could I have a word with you?" "Sit down, young fella, and have some breakfast." So I sat down with him, and the three of us had breakfast. It was astonishing. We spoke for half an hour. And then he wanted to get a bonnie and a hat and a blackthorn steak. So I brought him to a souvenir shop just on the corner of Calabrew Street. And the people of Dublin were just gobsmacked, staring at John Wayne walking down O'Connell Street. It was brilliant.
And was he very Hollywood? Was he down to earth?
Not even slightly. The only thing that was a bit Hollywood was he was telling me how brilliant a president Richard Nixon was. It was about 2 weeks before Nixon quit. But no, he wasn't really Hollywood at all. He was just chatty, and he said he loved Ireland. He believed him.
Why was he in Ireland?
He came to see Lord Clanan, who was in Zurich at the time. He didn't check. He was friends with Lord Clanan for some reason, but John, you see if I call him John? John was in London making Brannigan. That's the movie he got when he turned down Dirty Harry. But he just decided to fly over and see Lord Killannon, who happened to be with the Olympics in Zurich at the time. He went into the Glen of the Downs after his breakfast, and he'd lunch in the Glen of the Downs.
And he got to meet you, Paddy.
Wasn't he very lucky?
Now, another woman celebrity this time who clearly impressed you was Angard Rees. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I am, I think.
Angard Rees, yes. She was.
Yes. A lot of people might not be familiar with her, but she left an impression on you.
In the first run of Poldark, she was Demausa. And in the mid-70s, I'd say, at the Cork Film Festival, which is a massive occasion back then, they had a ball on the last night, and she was the guest of honor. And believe it or not, it wasn't Dutch courage. I decided to ask her to dance, and she said yes. And I thought like 30 seconds and it'd be go away then. And we danced 3 or 4 songs, and she was lovely and chatty and laughing and joking, and that was it. And I said to people afterwards, God, she was really, really charming. And they said, she's an actress. Okay, I'll take that. But she was really nice, and she didn't have to be.
Good. Now I would, yeah.
She was just lovely. She was actually, when she died, I sent a note to her family, and they invited me to her service in London. But because of my health, I couldn't go. But I would have loved to have gone.
God, isn't that lovely? Wow. I suppose on a very different note then, you had an interaction with somebody we saw just at the Brit Awards this week, looking very hale and hearty, Elton John. And it was to do with Northern Ireland.
Yeah, this always sounds a bit boasty, and I suppose it is, and I don't mind boasting. He was doing a gig in the RDS, which the Herald was the kind of a title sponsor. But the night before, he played in the King's Hall in Belfast. And I was sent up to do a review. And it was an extraordinary gig. It really, really was. I was at the side of the stage, and they did the encore. And then he came off stage and said, we'll do another encore. And the band said, we don't have anything. And he said, we'll do Beatles. And they went out and they did a couple of Beatles numbers. They were like the only genuine encore I've ever seen in my life. But what I wrote in the review was that after the gig, if you went outside King's Hall, there were kids and teenagers and young adults all standing around, drinking pints on the top of a car, having a laugh, having fun. And Belfast hadn't seen that for quite a while. It was like any other city in Europe when there was a gig. And that's what I wrote. And he was so thrilled with it. He sent for me at the RDS. My colleague James Morris, he said, Elton John wants to see you. And I said, I'm sure he is. Yeah, tell him I'm busy, John. Please, far too busy. I said, really, Paddy, he wants to meet you. And I said, I'm sure. By Tuesday, would that do? You know? But I said, James, you better not be messing. And he wasn't. He just said it was a lovely, intelligent review, and he was delighted with himself. A fair due to me, he went to Belfast when nobody else would. So 10 out of 10 for that. And I know he's portrayed now as a prima donna, which he may very well be. But I always got on really, really well with him. I've met him 3 or 4 times. And he was always nice.
You met him subsequently?
Well, the Herald had a competition a couple of years later. We brought 2 people to Paris to see him there in a big indoor arena. And before the gig, Jamaican, the promoter, brought the 3 of us down to meet Elton John. And we were down in the bowels of the stadium, and a door opened, and Elton John walked out, and he walked straight past Jamaican. And he said, hello, Paddy, how are you? And Jamaican said, I'm paying him £400,000 to play a gig in Dublin. And he says, hello, Paddy. So
he obviously had a good memory, Paddy, too, didn't he?
Didn't he just, yeah. Didn't he?
So, I mean, answer that question, Paddy. How come you had so much more fun and so many celebs in your career than I've had in mine? And do you think even for young journalists now, there's anyone having a time like that?
One of the reasons is that you can talk to celebs, or you could back then. I mean, if John Wayne or his equivalent was in the Gresham now, there'd be 4 layers of security and PR and management and that. You wouldn't be able to walk up and talk to him. Similarly, Elton John. I mean, I had one with James Taylor in the stadium, and I was told under no circumstances mention drugs or Carly Simon, his ex-wife. So I did the interview and I said, is this the first gig on the tour, James? Yeah. And you're launching the album? Yeah. And where do you go after here? London. I was getting these one-word answers. The PR guy, by the way, was standing behind him. I said, do you see much of Carly Simon these days? And the PR guys go, and he said, no, I don't see that much. I see her every now and then, you know. We still get on, and he went on and on and on. And then I said, tell me, James, drugs, would you be telling kids not to use drugs? Not at all, no. He said, that's up to them. And another big long spiel. So I think a lot of it was PR people trying to protect them from something they didn't need protecting from, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
He was perfectly happy to talk about those subjects.
Yeah.
I think today, though, it is much, much more difficult to get near people.
Yeah, and I suppose it's also the thing that this notion that everybody has a camera today, that everything they do is caught,
I think there's that. Yeah.
in some form or other.
No, I mean, I regard myself as being extremely lucky to have been a journalist when I was,
Mm,
because back then too, everything you had to go and do it. You couldn't look it up online.
right.
If you wanted to do
Absolutely.
something or talk to someone, you had to go meet them or telephone them at the very least.
Yeah, a journalist without Google.
A journalist, exactly. Where would we be?
Perish the thought.
Yeah.
And Paddy, I mean, there are more. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful, light-hearted moments in the book. But I mean, there are also more serious and sad ones. And one of those, obviously, was where you lost colleagues and friends in the Eastbourne air crash.
Yeah, that was I was actually in Mirabeau that night, believe it or not. The two friends of mine from Kerry, Frank and Mary Slattery, wanted to eat in the Mirabeau, so I knew Sean Keating, and we went out there and we had a meal. They
Posh
wanted
restaurant, was that was a posh restaurant, wasn't it? For those
the
who are
only,
not
the only
familiar.
posh restaurant there was at the time. But he wanted a late night drink, Frank, so we went into Zhivago
Mm.
because it was owned by my friend, Pat Gibbons. And I went to the bar and I said to the barmaid, I want to get a bottle of red wine, please. And she turned to her friend and she muttered something about John Feeney. And I said, I hope you don't say anything bad about my friend John Feeney. And she said, you haven't heard. I said, heard what? And she said, sit down, I'll bring your wine over. And I went back to the table. I said to the others, there's something very strange. I mentioned John Feeney and she's gone all funny. We'll see what happens. And she came over, put the wine down, poured me a glass and said, John is dead. The plane crashed. And I knew Niall was on the plane, Tony was on the plane, and Kevin was on the plane. I didn't know Pat Gibbons, in whose nightclub I was. I didn't know he was on the plane.
Explain maybe a bit more to people who are not familiar with those names, who they were, and your work.
Niall Hanley was my editor in the Evening Herald.
Yeah.
Kevin Marin was a previous editor of the Sunday World and a columnist in the Evening Herald. And John Feeney was the kind of wild man of social diarists at the time. He was really fun.
They were on a wine run.
It was
an unusual thing.
Annual jaunt. It was a kind of pretend thing. You flew over to Paris on a small plane, picked up the first bottle of Beaujolais Nouveau of the season, and brought it back. It was a publicity stunt. That's what it was, you know. I'd actually been on it the previous year, and there were 7 or 8 of us got pretty drunk, and flew there and flew back. And that was it. But you never expected
you had to pick yourself up after that, and
you will
be a journalist.
I went into the office and I met James Morrissey again. There was mostly obviously the Indo crew at 1 a.m. And James and myself went out to Niall Hanley's house, and met his family, his wife and young children. And then we suddenly dawned on the two of us. There's 2 pages in the Herald tomorrow by John Feeney and 1 by Kevin. So we went back into the office and we wrote the obituaries for the 4 lads. And this is at 4 or 5 in the morning. And we sorted out the paper for the next day because James was effectively editor at this stage because he had been Niall's deputy. And we had to be journalists about it. We had to go and do our jobs. And then over the following week, go to funeral after funeral after funeral.
God, it must have been absolutely devastating.
Oh, I swear, still, it never seems real. It seems so long ago. But it seems like yesterday too.
And in that instance, I suppose, I don't know whether it was both an advantage and a disadvantage. You knew them so well, you knew their families so well, you could almost write much of what you had to write from memory. But you address in the book a lot of being sent out, particularly for the Herald, if there had been some sort of a disaster, somebody was killed or died in a crash or something like that, and having to, and now obviously, again, going back to days like today, these days, you go on Facebook, you check social media for photographs and that. Very different then.
It was a case of you woke in at 8 o'clock in the morning, you'd hear the words, keep your coat on. You knew you were going out on a job that wasn't going to be very pleasant. The one that sticks to my mind was the time there was 2 paragraphs in the Indo saying a 16-year-old boy being stabbed to death in a gang war, in a gang fight at a block of flats in the city. And I was told to go out and talk to his family, get a picture. I wasn't looking forward to it. But when I knocked on the door, I got my courage up, and the door opened, a man in his 40s answered. He said, what? I said, my name is Paddy Murray from the Evening Herald. And he said, thank God you've come. My son was in no gang. And I was able to put the record straight. And I came out of it, that house. They were really lovely people, proud of the profession I was in. I know a lot of people rubbish it now, but we were able to we had to do that to tell the correct story about people who died in tragedies, rather than making it up or getting it off Facebook.
Yeah.
We went and met the families. I have to tell you, I was never turned away.
Really?
Not once.
Paddy? Never
Not
run to the door?
Not once. Once I didn't go because the neighbour said, please don't. But I was never turned away. And I think the families often found it cathartic in a way to have a stranger to talk to say, such and such was a great lad, he was a good guy. And, you know, I think they like to do that.
Yeah.
And we got used to doing it. We just did it over and over again. I say in the Stardust.
I was just going to say, one occasion when you literally had to do it over and over was in 1981 with the Stardust tragedy.
Well, I did a few houses, and I always went to the neighbour first, and the neighbour would bring me in. And I did a few houses, and I was in bits. I know people probably don't believe it now, Alison, but journalists are actually human. We are.
Yeah.
And we got to the last house, and I said to the taxi driver, I can't do it. And he said,
Paddy, how many do you think you had done before that?
I said in the book there was 2, but I think it was possibly 3 or maybe even 4.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah. Over a couple of days.
Yeah.
But the taxi driver said, what are you looking for? And I said, I need a picture. I need to find some details about the person who died. He said, I'll do it for you. So he went next door. He knocked on the neighbour's door. I saw the 2 of them go into the house. And 10 minutes later, he came out with a photograph and gave me all the details. Now, how unethical can you get? But I just couldn't do another house.
Yeah.
And again, at the funeral of the 2 Keegan girls, again, we were doing funeral after funeral. I had to stand close enough to hear the priest. And when the priest was talking, I started crying. And a woman beside me put her hand on my wrist. And she said, it's okay. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm a reporter from the Herald. And she said, it can't be easy for you either. And she held onto my wrist. And I thought, is there another country in the world? Would it happen to journalists now? I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We had a job to do and we did it.
Yeah, but when you got back to the office, Paddy, there was a thing where you just had to get on with it, didn't you? I mean, there was no such thing as counselling or take a few hours to get yourself together, anything like that. It was deadline.
A couple of hours later, you might be thrown a government press release and told to give us 6 paragraphs out of it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the job was the job. You did it for 8 hours every day, maybe more. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved the whole business of journalism. I say I didn't want to be a journalist, I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist, but my mother did, and she got me into it. So 46 years, she can't have been wrong. Mothers know things, you know that.
My God, almost half a century later, you'd have to say the woman had some serious intuition going on. Now, Paddy, you worked in all. I mean, you were a reporter, columnist. You know, you did all sorts of aspects of newspapers. But then I think it was 1999, was it? You were appointed editor of the Sunday Tribune. Yeah. You actually, just before we get into that, I just want to backtrack. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned one of the really lovely stories in the book is you talk about being invited to a children's party and how it gave you a very different perspective on life.
It wasn't anything to do with journalism, but a friend of mine, Brandon, his brother has intellectual disability of a serious nature, and he's deaf. But on Dermot's the brother, Dermot's 21st, I think it was, there was a party organised by his mother out in Chonagaz in Sallynoggin. And all the kids at it had intellectual difficulties of one kind or another. Most were Down syndrome. And I was handing out plates of sandwiches and orange juice. And as they were all sitting down, I identified a place for myself between 2 what I call then normal people. And I was just going over to sit down, and Millie Martin, Dermot's mother, said, "Would you just bring those sandwiches over there?" And I did. And I turned around, my place was gone. And the only other seat in the room was at the table where all of the others were teenage Down syndrome children. And I went over and sat down. I was very nervous. And one of them said, "What's your name?" I said, "Paddy." "Do you have a girlfriend?" "Yeah, I do, yeah." "Do you have sex?" Pardon? And then one said, "Where are you from?" "Marion." "Oh, you're a snob, are you?" And they proceeded, excuse my language, to take the piss out of me for 10 or 15 minutes. And then we got on great. They knew they were made. They knew I was uncomfortable, and they were just making fun of me. But we I suppose, nearly an hour together. And at the very end, I said to the girl beside me, who was about 16, "What's the worst thing about being Down syndrome?" And she said, "It's the way people say, at least they're always happy. We're not. We get sad and angry just like everybody else."
Mm.
And I left the table and went for a cry.
Mm.
And I see people now like Richard Dawkins saying, it's immoral to bring them into the world. How bloody dare he?
Yeah.
I mean, really, Brendan, I have to say, tore him asunder very quietly.
This was on the Brendan O'Connor show, last
Yeah,
Sunday.
tore him asunder very quietly. But they were just wonderful, wonderful children. And I say, if anyone in that room had a problem that day, it was me.
Yeah. Lesson
You know?
lesson learned. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So going back to the career and the Sunday Tribune, you hit the top job.
Yeah, Matt went off to the radio.
Not at the best of times.
Not really, no. I mean, I have to say when I got to the Tribune, that was in 1999, I joined the Tribune. I couldn't believe, looking around, the people who were there, how the Tribune wasn't selling double what it was.
Talent.
Most extraordinary staff they had there. I mean, from the likes of Stephen Collins, I'm not going to name them. There's so many, but they were just, the Indo was drip feeding it to keep it alive instead of promoting it, you know. It wanted it to damage the Sunday Times, but didn't want it to damage the Sunday Indo. So it didn't really offer much in the way of promotion. So I was there, I was 3 years editor, and then unfortunately my illness and my lymphoma got a bit. I was hospitalized.
You were diagnosed with lymphoma, which is a form of
cancer. I was in 98, yeah, before Matt appointed me deputy editor. Very knew I had it, yeah.
Yeah.
But it started getting worse, so I was relieved of my duties on the basis that I was told we want someone who's there all the time, not someone who's sick.
Jeez, so there wasn't that struck me as very harsh.
It is, maybe it is, yeah, but that's life.
It was very harsh, and you struck me as very forgiving. That particular passage.
You can only, what can I do? But I can't change it.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife or daughter will tell you, I do suffer anxiety. I worry about things that might happen. But if they've happened, I deal with them. You can't change what's happened. You just worry about what might happen. That's the way I am.
That is a good philosophy. One of the stories you tell, Paddy, is of someone that you used to meet on the street outside the Tribune offices on Bagot Street.
That was Michael. I used to come out of there was a news agent crossing the Trib, and I used to come out every morning with a coffee, and I'd throw my change out into this coffee cup, an addict begging. And one of my colleagues one day, Neil Dunphy, came up to me and said, I see you putting me in the cup for the addict outside the shop. And I confidently felt he was going to say next, he's only going to spend it on drugs. But he didn't. What Neil said was, why don't you get down and talk to him? It's as valuable as the money. And Neil explained that he worked with the homeless, so he knew what he was talking about. So every day then, I go down to my hunkers and I spoke to this guy, his name is Michael. And we talk about anything and nothing, soccer, music, anything, weather. And one day after several months of this, in November, I'd say it was, Michael said to me, what's your favorite aftershave, Paddy? And I said, did you like my aftershave, Michael? He said, no. He said, I want to get you a bottle for Christmas. And again, I lost it. Started weeping because I thought Michael was an addict, but what he was a human being. And here was the evidence. He's dead now. He didn't make it, but and I never got the aftershave, by the way. But I would say the thought of it.
It's the thought that counts. Yeah.
It was. The thought didn't matter very much with Michael.
Yeah.
So,
Paddy, you the last part of the book is got the headline Nearing the End and health and miracles. And you mentioned there your lymphoma. You also have you write about having stage 4 COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and you write very lovingly of your wife Connie, who you've mentioned there, and your daughter Charlotte. And you list all your various medical experts, and it's quite a list.
I've added another one since, by the way. There you go.
I see. And you also say that there are 3 things that keep you alive. You say that's positivity, music, and whinging. And then I'm going to hand back to you now at saying that You say something that most people wouldn't imagine someone in your position saying. You say, I am extraordinarily lucky.
Oh God, I think I am. I mean, I've had lymphoma for 22 years.
Mm,
Some people only have it for a couple of years.
yeah.
You know, I'm very lucky. I've had great doctors. I have great luck. Um, I don't know. I have a bit of faith. I wouldn't be the holiest person in the world, but
Mm,
maybe that helps. I have a sense of humor, I hope. But I think that's what I say. I mean, having lymphoma for 22 years is doing an awful lot better than some of the people who don't have it for that long.
yeah, it's true.
You know, I am lucky. I'm lucky. I've got Connie, I've Charlotte, I've a job I loved for 46 years. I mean, you can't beat that. I've got to travel all over the world with my job. I didn't have to put my hand in my pocket. You know, what's not lucky about that life?
Mm,
I mean, at the start of it, I started off with the best parents you could imagine.
mm.
So from start to hopefully not quite the finish, it's been good.
And yet you address that. You're saying nearing the end. So I mean, are you're
Well, I mean, the last prognosis I got said I wouldn't make Christmas last Christmas. So they were wrong. So I just
okay?
keep her going, you know. I was
Yeah,
at the doctor last week and he said, you're doing fine, keep it going.
it's great.
And like again, I live in Harold's Cross. I
Yeah,
can't think of anywhere better to live.
yeah,
You know, it's a
yeah.
fabulous area with lovely houses, lovely people, lovely streets, lovely shops, 2 parks. Couldn't beat it, you
And
know.
how, I mean, was it particularly, how did you feel in the last year with the pandemic and obviously having a compromised health? Was that very, very difficult?
Well, it wasn't, I'll tell you why, because I've been in hospital on average twice a year since my transplant. 13 years ago, next week,
With a bone
my
marrow
bone marrow
transplant?
transplant.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get very prone to infections.
Okay.
So the last time I was in hospital with an infection was last October, 12 months. But when I came out, I was told to more or less isolate. So I did. We normally have drinks here at Christmas. We cancelled, didn't go anywhere else for drinks.
Yeah.
And then when I was just about to emerge, the pandemic hit. So I've been isolating for 18 months.
Mm.
When I say isolating, I go out for a walk, I go out
Yeah.
driving. I just don't go into shops really, but so I'm used to it.
Okay.
I mean, from next week, maybe I'm gonna have some friends around for
Yeah.
coffee in the back garden, or maybe even a glass of wine.
Mm.
You never know. I think wine's very good for you, so they say, isn't that right?
Indeed. Well, I mean, I think look for a man who's 20 years in on a lymphoma diagnosis. I think whatever it is you're doing, you should keep doing it.
Well,
Now,
I'm lucky I got the diagnosis, by the way, because it was only
yeah,
a
how did
friend of mine.
tell how that came about? Yeah.
I used to play a bit of cricket. Now,
Mm.
they call it taverners cricket. That's messy, fun cricket.
Yeah.
And when I was changing afterwards in the dressing room, my body before I was diagnosed was covered in what I thought was psoriasis.
Right.
So lots of red blotches. So
And
when
there's a
we were,
picture. There's a picture. You have a picture in the book where your face is very red.
I'm like a traffic light. I am, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. But my body was like that. And I noticed people staring at me, and I didn't mind, but then every now and then I'd accidentally catch them staring at me, and it got very embarrassing.
Mm.
So I told my friend Michael I wasn't going to play anymore. And he told me to get my act together and go and see a different dermatologist.
Mm.
And I did. I went to see a lady called Rosemary Watson. And I think she diagnosed me as I walked in the door. Well, the first thing she said that was she was going to send me for a biopsy. I'm thinking, biopsy for psoriasis?
Mm.
She knew what it was. And from then on, I was treated various ways. Eventually, the bone marrow transplant has given me these 13 years, that's for sure.
You mentioned about how if you'd ever been asked to imagine how you would take a diagnosis like that, how you would have reacted and how you did.
Although I thought I would have screamed and burst out crying, but
Mm.
as it happens, that, I swear I don't know where it came from. When Rosemary Watson told me what it was, I said, I'm very lucky because I said, there's a man passing this hospital on a bus and he'll be dead by Saturday and he doesn't know there's anything wrong with him. And I'm lucky. Again, I really do think I'm lucky that I got diagnosed when I got diagnosed, you know.
Yeah.
And look, nobody's perfect health-wise or anything. We've all got something or other annoying us, you know.
Yeah, it's true. And as you say, who knows what tomorrow is going to bring.
They
You
are.
you mentioned your siblings in the book a couple of times, and that you have a brother, a bishop,
Yeah.
Donal.
Tired now.
Yeah, you're retired, and you have Mount Argus Church down at the end of your road. Is faith important to you? Is it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be. I call myself a Spike Milligan Catholic. I interviewed Spike one time, and he wanted to be Catholic, and I love the interview, by the way. He's a lovely, lovely man.
Okay.
But he said, the Catholic Church, rather than banning condoms, should be bringing truckloads of them into Africa, to prevent AIDS, etc. He said he disagreed with the church on so many things. I thought Jesus, if he came back, would be furious with the way the church is. Yeah. And I'd be that kind of Catholic. I don't understand celibacy, for example. Here's the thing I always think. This is very theological. Women aren't equal in the church. We know that. And yet, according to the church, the only woman in history who gave birth to a child without the assistance of a man is Mary.
Indeed.
Therefore, that puts women way above men. Yeah. She did it without a man.
Riddle me that.
Well, I just think it's nonsensical. It's nothing to do with theology. It's got to do with financial practicalities, I think, or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
But yeah, my faith is important, but it's not perfect.
I wouldn't disagree.
I like Mount Argus. Mount Argus is a nice church.
Yeah, it is a lovely church. Yeah,
some nice place up there.
I mean, we've spoken about your journalism and the long years of it. I'm wondering, do you have views on the media today, or when you're as an observer?
Well, I tell you what, one phrase that annoys me is citizen journalist. That people think that because they write a story, be it accurate or not, that they can call themselves citizen journalists. Do you think any of those people would have a citizen plumber around to fix their plumbing, or a citizen electrician to rewire their house? Believe it or not, journalists know what they're doing in the main.
Yeah.
You learn, mostly on the job, you learn, for example, how to knock on the door if someone has been bereaved. You know how to question a politician or when to question them. There's lots of things we learn that your citizen journalist hasn't a clue, and just thinks they can write stories. Of course, everyone's free to express themselves.
Yeah.
But they don't have to call themselves journalists, because I think, in the main, I think we're very lucky in Ireland with our media. I really do. And I include, by the way, RT in that. People always, the damn license fee. My God, I pay 20 times the license fee for my Sky Sport, BT Sport, and Air Sport every year.
Yeah.
I mean, Netflix and all that. People just seem to know, but RT produces independent news. I'd rather that than Rupert Murdoch running our national television station.
And God knows we were hanging on to everything they had to say during the pandemic. All of the information and we trusted it.
But look at some of the RT Investigates programs have been brilliant.
Yeah.
Like without the license fee, they wouldn't be happening.
Would you have any advice if somebody came along to you and they were studying journalism or thinking about it or had just graduated? Would you have advice for a young journalist?
Oh gosh, I mean, I just think the difficulty is that because of falling circulation, etc., that the salaries aren't what they were. So my advice would be, if you're convinced you're a journalist, if it's a vocation, go for it. Get there in the end. You will get there in the end, but the early years are going to be tough.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't that easy for any of us, were they? The early years. But,
no.
I think falling circulations. I think the Daily Mail is the only paper in the world that makes all of its income online.
Yes.
It's subscription free.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to.
That's certainly a rabbit hole. The Daily Mail website, if you fall into emerge 3 hours later.
I think people will be sorry if we lose any more newspapers.
Yeah.
We've lost a load of provincial newspapers. I think it's really, really sad to see them going.
Yeah.
But it's great news. There's great one at the Connacht Tribune and place like that. Dave O'Connell, my former colleague, runs that. He does a great job, and it really is. It's bouncing.
It's a super. And even where I'm from in West Cork, my local newspaper, the Southern Star, is absolutely thriving. So there are certainly good news stories out there about the media as well.
I think they're right too. I think it has a future. I mean, people said cinema was dead. They said television was dead, radio was dead, vinyl was dead. All these things were dead, and they didn't die.
At the very end of the book, Paddy, you have a number of lists. Tell us a bit about them and why you did them.
I think they probably say more than me more about me than the book. My favorite movies, books, songs, albums, gigs. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
But my favorite book is Pocoon, and always was and always will be. It's Mike Milligan's book.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just fantastic, and I think I was talking to others. My second favorite book surprised people, which is "Oh, the Places You'll Go" by Dr. Seuss. Which is I'm sure you're familiar with.
Politically correct at the moment.
Yeah, but it's a book that drags you down and shows you how sad the world can be, and then in the end, was it 98 3/4% sure you're going to succeed? It's a brilliant book. I've given it to loads of people, moving house, changing jobs, or whatever, and they've all
very appropriate for those sort of life-changing events.
Come back and said, "It's brilliant. It's uplifting," you know.
Yeah.
Breakfast at Tiffany's, of course, is my favorite movie because Audrey Hepburn's in it. I mean, that's the beginning and end of it. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. That's why I just think she's fantastic in it. I really do. I love everything she's in.
And gig?
Well, my favorite gig was 1969 in the National Stadium. Was Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. That was, as I say, Fleetwood Mac before they became Bucks Fizz, which is that annoys a lot of people when I say that. But Fleetwood Mac was a proper blues band, and when Peter Green and Jeremy Spencer left, I think they became Bucks Fizz. You know, just not the same thing at all.
Now, Paddy, it should be said that most of these gigs you attended, it wasn't as a punter.
No.
You were not moshing.
Oh no, gosh, no. I got to very, very few free gigs in my life. I don't know why that is.
But I mean, there was a number you write in the book about being backstage at Slane and stuff.
Oh, but that was there were a few, I suppose. Yeah, that was Brian. You know.
Well, I suppose the few that really did count. Yeah.
You know Brian Farrell, the photographer?
I sure do.
Brian and I were saying one year, he hates me telling this story. That's why I'm telling it. And we were outside the castle, not with the ordinary punters. And to get a view of the stage, we were standing on bar stools. And Brian said, "Do you want another pint?" I said, "Yeah, don't let anyone near my chair." I said, "Okay." So he went in to get the pints, and then a man stood on the bar stool beside me. And when Brian came back, he looked, put the pints on the ground, pulled the guy off the stool, told him to F off, and then turned around to me and said, "I told you not to let anyone stand on my stool." I said, "I didn't think you'd mind Eric Clapton standing on it." And he looked, he said, "Oh, God, jeez." He was just after telling Eric Clapton to F off, which I've never let him live down.
Paddy, I think that is a wonderful note for us to finish on. The book, which I have here, and you can see it, and finally, A Journalist's Life in 250 Stories, is available locally to those of us in Harold's Cross, Hannah's in Rathmines, the Village Bookshop in Terranure. There was a third, Paddy, wasn't there? Liffey Press, the publishers.
The usual people have it as well. But
exactly.
Please don't buy it on Amazon.
As you said to me earlier, Jeff Bezos has enough money.
He's enough money.
So, Paddy, we're closing off this year's Harold's Cross Community Festival, which is an honour, the last event. Thank you very much for the interview, and I recommend the book.
Thank you very much.